I just know you're ready to hear about a little crime. Welcome to Crime Daddies.
Warning, this podcast is hosted by two true crime dads that will talk about murder, drugs, rape, and offenses against children. We may crack jokes and make light of something so terrible that has happened, but it will never be about the victim or the victim's family. You have been warned. Welcome back to Crime Daddies, everybody. I am Hunter.
And I am Jacob.
We are so thankful to have each and every one of you back for another week, and this is going to be episode 2 of the Tip Line.
Yeah, so these cases were suggested by you guys, and we're going to record them for you guys to listen to. So if you guys are ever interested in submitting a case to hear, go ahead and go to the link in all of our bio on social media, and you can find a link to a Google form. And from there, you just go submit a case, and all me and Hunter ask for is that you give us 2 sources. It's easier that way. It gives us more information. It's kind of hard to put together a case without at least 2 sources.
And without further ado, we're not going to bore you guys with a bunch of nonchalant talk. So, Jacob, let's get right into it.
All right, let's hop into it. So this one was suggested from somebody, and I'm going to refrain from saying the name, but it takes us over to Poplar Bluff. Now, if you guys have been listening for a while, we've already went over there a little bit. We actually started there in our first episode. We talked about Poplar Bluff a little bit. At one point, what did we call Poplar Bluff? We called it the...
I actually called it the gateway to opiate addiction, not the gateway to the Ozarks.
Right. So if you guys are familiar with it, and if not, I'm just going to tell you that Poplar Bluff, just like many places in this area, is not some massive metropolitan area. It's more of a regional hub surrounded by a lot of smaller towns, farmland, forest, rural communities. It has hospitals, it has shopping centers, restaurants, some schools, and some businesses that bring people from Southeast Missouri and Northern Arkansas all together in one similar area. For many people living in the surrounding counties, Poplar Bluff is where you work, shop, receive medical treatment, or just spend the day. Sometimes, like we said, it's called the gateway to the Ozarks. It sits along the Black River in Butler County and has historically served as an important transportation and commercial center for this part of Missouri. Major highways pass through the area, and Poplar Bluff is positioned within driving distance of several state lines. That location helped the city grow, but it also created opportunities for drugs and trafficking and people attempting to move through the region without much attention. So before anybody from Bluff gets angry with us, we're not saying everybody who lives there is a criminal or that the city is just completely dangerous. Thousands of ordinary people live, work, and raise families, operate businesses there day in and day out.
Yeah, absolutely. I love Poplar Bluff. I go to Poplar Bluff like once a week, it seems like. And honestly, Poplar Bluff is getting to be better to go to than Cape. And I'm not just saying that because I'm trying to make everybody happy. I really feel that way. I mean, Poplar Bluff has almost as good a shopping as Cape at this point.
It does. And it's conveniently located towards like the Ozarks, like where they start. And so they're really within driving distance of a lot of swimming places. And the place that me and Hunter have been going this summer, a place called Rocky Falls over there in the Ozarks, is only like 45 minutes away from Poplar Bluff. So it's convenient. So we're not just trying to say everybody from Bluff is a low down criminal, right?
Right. Shout out B-Dubs, shout out Big Whiskeys, and shout out Academy.
Heard that. So as you guys know, most of you guys are not involved in crime. However, whenever crime statistics are adjusted for population, smaller cities can sometimes reveal problems that total numbers would otherwise hide. So that's where this phrase, quote, per 1,000 residents becomes important. A city with 100 crimes and 10,000 residents has a much higher crime rate than a city with 100 crimes and 1 million residents. Looking at crime per capita allows researchers to compare cities of different sizes instead of only looking at the total number of police reports. In 2014, Poplar Bluff was included in a ranking of the 10 most dangerous cities in Missouri. At the time, its reported crime rate was approximately 87 crimes for every 1,000 residents. That means the number of crimes recorded during that period being measured was equal to almost 9% of the city's population did crime.
Isn't Sykes still ranked number 1?
I think it is. It's pretty outdated. I'm not sure these studies have been updated in over a decade, but it's pretty close. Sikeston's really dangerous too. So if I could give you guys some perspective on that, Chicago, for example, which was at one point labeled the most crime-ridden city in the Midwest, Chirac, exactly, has about 40 crimes per 1,000 residents. And if Poplar Bluff has 87 per 1,000 residents, it's saying that Poplar Bluff is like almost as twice as dangerous in terms of crime happening than Chicago is.
But let's just be honest, you're definitely more likely to have a life-threatening crime happen to you in Chicago in a wrong neighborhood.
Right. Just because there's higher crime rates in Poplar Bluff doesn't mean the crime is the same. Violent crime tends to be higher in Chicago than Poplar Bluff. There's just more crime happening, which happens to be a lot of drugs, to be honest. Just small, petty drug crime. Just small, petty crime, theft, drugs, and all the other just crap that happens in Bluff. Crime statistics can also change significantly from year to year, especially in a city with a smaller population. A handful of additional crimes can make a much larger difference in a city of 16,000 people than it would in a city of several 100,000. You got to think reporting practices, law enforcement activity, and the sources used by crime ranking websites can also produce very different results. So we're not saying that this one ranking from 2014 permanently defines Poplar Bluff, but what it does show is that the city did have a problem with crime and it struggled. And it seems like a portion of its population was a part of it. Because Bluff serves many more people than just who live there, people regularly travel through Butler County and surrounding areas to shop and all the other stuff. All that daily movement increases the number of people in the area, vehicles in the area, interactions happening. And even though those visitors are not counted as residents, they can be counted in crime rates. Not to mention, there are tons of economic problems that can't be ignored. Again, poverty does not automatically create criminals, but being poor does make someone more susceptible to dangerous activity. Communities dealing with poverty and unstable housing, addiction, and all these limited mental health resources and such can experience conditions where certain crimes just become, common. A person struggling with substance abuse may become involved with theft, right? My dad told me plenty of stories of whenever he was strung out, just the way he would just to steal. Like the other day, I was at his house, and he lives in Southside Poplar Bluff, and he locked my keys in my fiance's car, and he was hell-bent on getting him out himself, and it took him probably an hour, and he said, "Jacob, I haven't robbed anybody in probably 20 years. He said, "I used to be a lot better at this." So it's just a story. He was an addict, and he knew the crime happens. The city's location also matters. Highway 60 cuts across southern Missouri, while Highway 67 travels north and south through the area. From Bluff, a person can travel towards St. Louis, Memphis, Arkansas, Kentucky, or even farther into the Midwest. For most people, those highways are simply how they travel to work or visit family, or even move products between business to business. But for people transporting illegal drugs, stolen property, weapons, or money, those same highways can become a part of a larger network. That doesn't mean every crime committed in Bluff is connected to organized crime. Most crimes are individual decisions, but the location has repeatedly placed the city near cases and investigations involving people who operated far beyond Butler County. That brings us to the case at the center of today's episode. It involves a Poplar Bluff businessman, a bunch of unanswered questions, and a man who may have just found himself caught between the people who wanted something done and people responsible for doing it. And more than 30 years later, the case remains surrounded by a lot of questions like who was really responsible, what did he know, and was he targeted because he had become, quote unquote, the middleman? And that's where the story begins. In the spring of 1987, a man by the name of Tommy Rowland was 39 years old and living in the Poplar Bluff area. Officially, he was described as an unemployed laborer. Unofficially, police believed he had another job, serving as the middleman in a large-scale marijuana operation. According to investigators, significant quantities of marijuana were being transported from outside Missouri into the Bluff area. Police described shipments involving more than 20 pounds at a time. Once the marijuana arrived, the operation needed somebody local who could break those larger amounts down and get the drugs into the hands of these lower-level dealers. And that was allegedly what Tommy's role was. He wasn't like the kingpin, but he was a spoke on a wheel. He was a person that stood between the larger suppliers and then the smaller dealers. He reportedly received the larger shipments and he would distribute them farther down the chain. That position may have given him access to money, people, and information that most lower level dealers would have never seen. It also placed him in a very extremely dangerous position. When you stand in the middle of a criminal operation, you become valuable to everyone involved, but you can also become a liability to everybody involved. You see, Rowland was already well known in Bluff to law enforcement. According to a detective from the area, Rowland's criminal history included drug arrests, assaults, burglaries, and home invasions. He lived within the criminal world associated with these people, and he had already attracted the attention of the police many times. But investigators would later come to believe that Rowland had attracted the attention of somebody higher within the drug operation, and that person may have decided Tommy needed to be removed from the middle. The final known timeline of Tommy Rowland's life began on May 11th, 1987. At approximately 6 o'clock that evening, Tommy was seen at a Poplar Bluff bar called Duck Inn. He was sitting with a younger man who was described at the time as having a medium build and shoulder-length hair. As Tommy and the other man prepared to leave, Tommy's wife, Rhonda, reportedly stopped them. She asked Tommy whether she could go with him. According to the original police report, Tommy responded, "No, I would rather you didn't." Tommy then left the bar with the younger man, and it was the last time Rhonda would ever see her husband alive again.
Well, from the sound of it, it sounds like it's a good thing he had the intuition to tell her not to go with him. I'm not saying he knew something bad was going to happen, but at least it's not going to be two people involved in what Jacob's about to
right?
tell us right now.
Yeah, I mean, I can respect a guy that doesn't want his partner to get involved. He said, "You know what? Chill, I got this."
But before you continue, isn't it crazy how many different crimes were committed in the marijuana industry back in the day, and now it's just get in your car, drive down the road, and go get it from a dispensary?
That's wild, isn't it? Like, people died over this stuff, and here we are just, it's legal now. Let's go just buy whatever we want, whenever we want. If I want to go party, I can just go buy up to an ounce to carry on me at one point. Whenever I was in high school, I was being a little El Chapo with a bunch of people in a parking lot.
In my opinion, it is kind of a injustice for people that could be locked up right now that got in trouble for selling weed.
Right.
Like, if their only charge was distributing marijuana, like, I think they should be let out. But that's just my opinion.
I think so too. I think there's a lot of things that are attributed with marijuana that at this point in time, we have people that are just sitting and we're spending a lot of taxpayer money on keeping them in jail, and now it's legal, right? And it's just it's injustice towards them, but it's also an injustice on you as a citizen having to pay for people that shouldn't be locked up because it's legal now.
Now, when I say their charges, I mean, like, if they got pulled over and they had like half a pound of marijuana on them and they're in jail for trafficking, I think they should be let out. Now, if their charges are being charges of marijuana with assault and, stuff like that, then obviously there's more to it than just having marijuana. But if it's simply just trafficking marijuana, then I don't think you should be in prison in the state of Missouri.
Right. Now, investigators believe the two men left Poplar Bluff in Tommy's maroon Oldsmobile and traveled to a rural property in Carter County. The other man... Sorry.
What model? Is that a 442 or is that a Cutlass?
It doesn't say, but there are some pictures. I'll have to pull up the one that it shows, and I'll post it on Instagram and Facebook for you guys to see. Don't worry, it's not. There's nothing gory in it. It's just a picture of his vehicle.
All right, sorry for that distraction, everybody. But if you read the post about Meet Your Crime Daddies, you're going to see that I was a car enthusiast, so I was curious on what kind of Oldsmobile it was.
Right. Yeah, but we'll keep it posted. I'll show you here in a minute. The other man reportedly had connections to this property in Carter County and had been staying there on and off for some time. Now, what happened at that property was later described by someone who had reportedly shared a jail cell with the suspected killer. According to that account, Tommy and the other man got into an argument. At some point during that confrontation, the man allegedly pulled out a .38 caliber revolver. The alleged shooter accused Tommy of being a snitch and then shot him once in the right temple. Investigators believe that Tommy's body was placed inside the trunk of his own car. The vehicle was then driven back to Poplar Bluff and abandoned in one of the most public places possible. On May 14th, 1987, 3 days after Tommy was last seen, shoppers at the Valley Plaza Mall began noticing a maroon Oldsmobile sitting in the parking lot. And something about that vehicle just kind of seemed off. And I'm telling you guys, it's May in Southeast Missouri. That's one thing. What is it, Hunter?
It's hot, and that decomposition is going to be reeking coming from that Oldsmobile.
Stank. It's going to be stinky. So they reported a very strong foul odor coming from the trunk. Witnesses also noticed some type of liquid dripping from underneath the car. Yeah, gross. Police were called to investigate. When an officer opened the trunk, the sight and smell reportedly caused him to step backwards. Inside was the badly decomposed body of a man who appeared to have been dead for several days. The victim was quickly identified as Tommy Rowland. An examination determined that Tommy had been shot once in the head and that marijuana had been scattered across his chest inside the trunk.
Is that kind of like symbolic?
Yeah, I mean, that detail made the message difficult to understand.
To me, that shows like, hey, if you're wondering who did this crime, look at people involved in drug trafficking or marijuana trafficking.
Right.
But if you was involved in marijuana trafficking and you committed this crime, why would you give away that symbolic message?
Because you're a criminal and it's like a big F you to the police. It's like here, not every criminal does it, but there's a lot of criminals that like to leave intentional clues because they have a really big ego. We see that all the time.
I mean, yeah, I get that, but I don't know. Like, you mainly see that with serial killers,
right?
Because they haven't been caught and they're taunting them, saying "You can't catch me." But like, if this is your first time doing this and you're already being arrogant, pretty stupid.
It is, isn't it? So whoever placed that marijuana on his body apparently wanted someone to make the connection. It was not an effort to make Tommy disappear. They put him in a very obvious place that he was going to be found.
Yeah, they wanted him to be found, like, and they wanted it to be known, like, this guy got off. I guess I get it now. They wanted him to be found, and they wanted it to be known, like, if you're in this, keep your mouth shut.
And also, they wanted his image to go in the toilet. They wanted to say, here he is. He's involved with this. He got found with marijuana. Back in the 80s, if you were doing marijuana, we're in the Bible Belt. Like, it can make not only you, but your family looked down upon.
Because he was a businessman, right?
Right.
Okay.
Investigators believe that the killing had been designed to send a public warning, is what they said. Now, they thoroughly searched his vehicle, and there were numerous fingerprints recovered from both the interior and exterior of the car. Investigators also collected some cigarette butts and examined the boots Tommy had been wearing when he died. One of those boots contained a reddish stain. Years later, one of the detectives said improved forensic technology could potentially determine whether that stain came from Tommy or from another person who had been present during a struggle. Police had also began receiving information from people within Poplar Bluff's criminal community. One tip directed investigators away from the mall parking lot and toward that rural Carter County property where they believed Tommy had actually been killed. Authorities secured and searched the property, but the case presented an immediate jurisdictional problem. And if you guys know anything about true crime and police jurisdictions, it is just one big pissing contest.
So they're going to have Butler County and Carter County button heads on the jurisdiction, like who's going to be doing what part of the investigation.
Right, because his body was found in Butler County, and they think he actually died in Carter County. So that distinction would become important because a murder generally must be prosecuted in the county where the killing occurred.
And I'm sure Carter County didn't want to be a part of it.
Right. But despite the complications, investigators quickly developed a prime suspect. Police believe the man last leaving the Duck Inn with Tommy was also a man who shot him. That suspect was named Yule Joe Freeman. Police also heard reports that there had been a contract placed on Tommy's life. According to one allegation, Freeman told an acquaintance that he could make $5,000 by carrying it out. Investigators believed somebody higher within the drug operation wanted Tommy removed and used Freeman to do it. In that theory, Tommy was killed because he had become a threat, had been accused of giving information to the police, or had otherwise become expendable to people supplying the drugs. But despite the witness statements, physical evidence, rumors of a contract, and the identity of a clear suspect, the case did not immediately result in a lasting prosecution. Investigators originally attempted to pursue charges through Butler County in 1987. Now, those charges were later dropped when authorities determined that Tommy was likely killed at Carter County. The case then remained open for decades. In 2011, that same detective was assigned to review the murder as a cold case. He reorganized the old reports, examined the remaining evidence, and tracked down witnesses and attempted to build a case that could still be prosecuted after many years. When KFVS 12 featured Tommy's story as part of its, quote, Heartland Unsolved series in 2016, investigators made it clear that they did not view this as a mystery or they had absolutely no idea who committed the crime. They believed they knew who pulled the trigger. It was all about putting him in the right place at the right time. The difficulty was gathering reliable evidence, placing the case in the correct jurisdiction, and presenting something prosecutors could take to court nearly 30 years after the murder. Investigators hoped that people who had been too afraid to speak in 1987 might finally be willing to come forward. The people involved were older, obviously relationships had changed, and the drug operation that was there in the 1980s was possibly different or maybe just gone. Then, in 2021, the case finally moved forward. The detective worked with the Carter County prosecuting attorney and submitted a probable cause statement accusing Yule Joe Freeman of Tommy Rowland's murder. On July 14, 2021, first-degree murder charges were filed against Freeman. A warrant connected to Tommy's death was issued that September. At the time those charges were announced, Freeman was already in prison for unrelated convictions, including assault and armed criminal action. He was ordered held without bond in connection to Tommy's murder. Freeman had reportedly been the primary suspect from the beginning, and he was the man investigators believed that left the Duck Inn with Tommy that night, traveled with him to Carter County, accused him of being a snitch, and shot him in the head. So for more than 3 decades, his killing represented one of the most unanswered crimes connected to Poplar Bluff's drug trade, but the filing of charges in 2021 showed that a cold case is not necessarily a forgotten case. Tommy, he lived dangerously, and police knew that, but they also made no attempt to hide that criminal history. But being involved in crime does not make your murder legal, right? It doesn't make your death meaningless. His family still lived for decades without closure, and the person responsible still needed to be held accountable. The marijuana scattered over Tommy's body was meant to explain why he died. It was supposed to label him, reduce him to his criminal activity, and send a warning to anyone else who might step out of line. But it also revealed something much larger. Now, you see, Tommy Rowland was not operating alone. His death pointed toward a drug network that extended beyond one man, one bar, and one parking lot. Marijuana being transported into southeast Missouri in large quantities, distributed through local middlemen like Tommy, and protected through threats and violence. And Tommy's murder was only one example of how organized trafficking found a home in rural Missouri. Because during the same period, Poplar Bluff was not simply dealing with local dealers selling small amounts of drugs. Investigators were beginning to uncover connections stretching across state lines and alleged ties to a criminal organization that became known as the Midwest Mafia. Now, Tommy's murder was not just a story of one man caught up in drugs, right? It just showed how organized trafficking could operate in Poplar Bluff without looking like the mafia you might see, I don't know, on The Godfather or The Sopranos. Like, they're not wearing expensive suits and having private clubs or movie-style crime bosses sitting around a table. Instead, it's simply just suppliers bringing in drugs from somewhere outside Missouri, middlemen like Tommy receiving these shipments, and then local dealers breaking them down. Then you have street-level sellers moving them throughout the community. Investigators said the operation connected to Tommy involved shipments of more than 20 pounds of marijuana at one time. This is what made someone like Tommy important. The people supplying the marijuana did not necessarily want to personally deal with every small-town dealer or street-level customer. They needed someone local who knew the area, knows the law enforcement, and knows your clientele. But being the middleman also meant Tommy stood between both sides of the operation. He knew who was bringing the drugs into Bluff. He also knew who was buying them. He knew how much was being moved, where it was coming from, where it's going to. If anyone believed he was talking to police, or stealing from the operation, or just becoming unreliable, then Tommy was no longer, I guess, useful in their eyes. He was dangerous. That is organized crime at its root. And even when the people involved do not belong to a famous criminal family with a recognizable name doesn't mean they're not as dangerous. And over the years, the terms Midwest Mafia or Dixie Mafia or Cornbread Mafia have been used to describe different organized criminal networks operating through the middle and southern United States. But those names can sometimes create more confusion than clarity. There is no confirmed evidence in the available reporting that Tommy Rowland was officially connected to these mafia syndicates, but what investigators do believe is that he was a part of a structured interstate drug operation with suppliers, distributors, low level dealers, and allegations of a paid contract and violence being used to protect their business. So, whether anybody involved called themselves a mafia doesn't really matter. The operation behaved like a mafia, and Bluff's location just made it very useful. Like I've said before, it is just kind of at a perfect spot on a map because it's between Memphis and St. Louis and Kansas City, where there was organized crime, and it's kind of like a hub that's connected by interstate, and it's quick drives. I mean, Bluff to Kansas City is maybe 4.5 hours, probably the same to St. Louis.
Well, yeah, and then you put into perspective that Mark Twain National Forest is literally from the Ozarks forward outside of Poplar Bluff. Think about how much marijuana has been grown out there, and then
Right.
also think about how many people have disappeared out there because of crime.
Right.
Because, I mean, there's just miles and miles and miles of wilderness out there that people may not walk the same stretch of woods for a year or two.
It's easy to get lost, for sure. It's easy for people to disappear, and especially back then, it was easy to just be disconnected, and then these things happen. But what made this case set apart is that whoever did this was sending a message. They put his body in public, somewhere he was going to be found, and they put marijuana on him as I'd say, symbolic gesture to the community, even to law enforcement.
So, was it the incompetence of Carter County that may have caused this to go unsolved for so long?
There may have been a lot of, like I said, whenever you have a bunch of guys fighting over jurisdiction, uh, they're just saying, whose dick's bigger? You know, this is my case. No, this is my case. Oh, what happened here? But what happened here? And it just becomes more of an ego thing. And they put aside that someone was dead, and it became about, okay, I want this on my resume to say I solved this crime, I got this prosecution, and all this stuff. And so there definitely was on both sides, Butler County and Carter County, just not playing well with one another. Now, SEMO does have a lot of ties to illegal drug organizations, and for the most part, within the past 20 to 30 years, narcotics from outside the region have came in and been redistributed locally. In one federal case, authorities said that a California man had shipped methamphetamine straight to Poplar Bluff, and sometimes flew to Missouri himself to distribute it and send the money back to California. It just shows you how connected the gateway to the Ozarks really is. But for more than 30 years, the message outlived Tommy himself. His criminal history became part of how his story was told, and while the person accused of killing him remained unprosecuted, Tommy's involvement in the crime did not make his life disposable. It did not mean his family deserved to spend decades without answers, and it did not excuse the person who allegedly accepted money to put a bullet in his head. The filing of a first-degree murder charge against Yule Joe Freeman in 2021 finally represented movement in a case that had been open since 1997. It also showed that time does not automatically erase responsibility. Poplar Bluff is not entirely defined by crime. It's home to like a lot of good families, workers, and businesses, but it also has a history that demonstrates that organized crime does exist, and it doesn't always have to be in major cities. Sometimes it's in familiar highways, and sometimes it's in rural properties or neighborhood bars. And sometimes a person connected to the entire operation is just a laborer sitting in a tavern, unaware that someone higher in the chain has allegedly decided he is worth more dead than alive. Tommy Rowland spent his final years working as the middleman of a dangerous operation. In the end, the middle became the most dangerous place he could possibly be in. And that is the story of Tommy Rowland, the middleman. What do you think, Connor? You ever heard of it?
No, I've actually never heard of this story. Surprisingly.
Like we've said before, as always, remember that criminal charges are accusations until proven in court, and the people discussed in episodes should be considered innocent until proven guilty. And so, as of Right now, Yule Joe Freeman has just been charged with first-degree murder, and I haven't found anything on my end to suggest that he has been found guilty or innocent or anything else. This was a quick episode for Tip Line, and I didn't really do too much deep diving besides in the few sources I was given by the person who suggested it, because we like to keep these short so we can get two in one episode. But I'm not going to say that he did it for sure, because in a court of law.
I mean, here's the thing. It's circumstantial.
Right.
And if you put circumstantial evidence from 1987 in front of a jury of 12 of your peers, more than likely he's going to be found not guilty if they don't have any hardcore like the gun analysis or the bullet analysis or DNA analysis. If they don't have like strong evidence that prove you did this, he's going to be found not guilty. Because think about, you are a part of a jury that is going to be convicting somebody of first degree murder and possibly could get death penalty or life in prison. Would you feel comfortable giving somebody that sentence over some circumstantial evidence? Me, myself, I wouldn't, because if you haven't been provided the strong facts showing that this person for sure did it, it's hard to say that they did it.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, you need to make sure there's not a single ounce of doubt in your body before you ever say someone's guilty. If you even feel off about it at all, you got to say not guilty, right? That's how you should be as a jury. If you're not sure, then you should never make a decision on someone's life.
Absolutely.
And so that's the case of the middleman. And now Hunter's going to hop into his case for the Tip Line episode.
Before I do, I just want to say rest in peace to Tommy, and our condolences go out to his family.
Yep. No matter what, if you're in this kind of game, your life's still valuable. I mean, my dad was a part of the game for years, and it would be hard to say just because he was in part of it doesn't mean his life doesn't matter. It definitely does. But now on to the next case.
Well, everybody, this Tip Line episode I'm covering is taking us back to Malden in Dunklin County. And if you remember the episode I just did about Malden, I'm not necessarily going to go into a lot of facts about Malden because I just did it. But we wanted to cover this because this case is kind of interesting, and it's another one that I've personally never heard of.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. I like to see what you guys can suggest, and you guys have been giving us some things I've never seen before. And I thought we knew some stuff about the crimes that were happening around here. Like, we've been doing some research for 4 months now, and you guys are still giving us things we didn't know about.
There are some crimes that make detectives scratch their heads. Some leave behind fingerprints. Others leave behind DNA. And then there are some cases where the killer seems to leave behind a trail so strange, it's almost like they're daring investigators to follow it. Tonight's story is one of those cases. It begins in a quiet farming community of Malden, Missouri, a place where neighbors know one another. Front porch lights stay on late, and the biggest excitement usually involves sporting events in the community. But in December of 1996, that quiet routine came to an abrupt end. Behind the front door of one modest home was a crime scene that investigators would never forget. 2 elderly victims, a hidden safe, thousands of dollars in cash, a mysterious bundle of money abandoned in a snowy field, and a suspect whose own mistakes would slowly unravel nearly every lie he tried to tell. This is the story of the murders of Cecil and Ethel Phillips. December 17th, 1996. Christmas was only a week away. Like many small towns across southeast Missouri, Malden had settled into winter. Families were finishing shopping. Roads were beginning to ice over as snow drifted across the fields. Inside their home, Cecil and Ethel Phillips were spending what appeared to be an ordinary evening. Around 6 o'clock, Ethel called her granddaughter. Nothing about the conversation stood out. They chatted for about 15 minutes. No panic, no concern. Nothing that suggested those would be among Ethel's final moments. Outside, neighbors later remembered seeing the Phillips security lights glowing through the evening. Then, sometime before midnight, everything changed. The next morning came and went. Nobody answered the door. One visitor stopped by twice. She knocked. Silence. But something felt off. The television was playing loudly inside the house. The front gate sat partially open. Now, maybe you've had that one neighbor who leaves the TV on at full blast 24 hours a day. Every town has one, but this wasn't normal for the Phillips. Still, no one imagined what was waiting inside. Not yet. Nearly 24 hours after Ethel's phone call, her granddaughter decided to check on her grandparents herself. As she approached the house, she immediately noticed the same thing. The gate was still standing open. She knocked. She called out. Still nothing. Then she looked through a small opening beneath the curtain, and her world stopped. She saw her grandmother lying motionless on the floor. The granddaughter ran to a neighbor's house in terror. Together, they hurried back. The front door wouldn't budge. It had been secured from inside. After several unsuccessful attempts to force it open, the neighbor smashed a window and reached inside and unlocked the door. Even then, a heavy wooden board was still barring the entrance. That detail would become incredibly important later. When the door finally opened, the neighbor stepped inside. Almost immediately, he turned around and stopped. He didn't want her to see what was waiting inside the house. Moments later, officers from Malden Police Department arrived. One officer entered with his weapon drawn. The television was still blasting. The sound filled every room. Ethel Phillips lay in the front room. A recliner had fallen across a part of her body. Blood stained the floor. The officer cautiously searched deeper into the house. Then he found Cecil Phillips. He laid in the hallway. Nearby, bloody footprints crossed the carpet. Someone had walked through blood and walked away. The officer continued clearing the home room by room. One bedroom looked as though someone had tossed it upside down searching for something. Closets had been disturbed. Items littered the floor. Then, a movement beneath another bed. For just one split second, the officer thought someone might still be hiding there. Instead, out peeked the family dog, probably wondering why everyone suddenly had such terrible manners. The dog, frightened but unharmed, had spent nearly an entire day hiding beneath the bed while the house remained silent. Outside, investigators quickly noticed something else. The back door showed what appeared to be bloody fingerprints near the latch. Unlike the front entrance, there was no heavy wooden board securing that exit. Whoever left the house likely didn't leave through the front door. They slipped out the back. Now detectives had a growing list of questions. Who had done this? Why target an elderly couple? Why search one bedroom so aggressively? And perhaps most importantly, what exactly had the killer been looking for? They wouldn't have to search long for the answer. Hidden beneath the carpet inside a bedroom closet, investigators discovered something almost no casual visitor would ever know existed: a floor safe. The padlock had been cut. Inside, almost nothing remained except broken pieces of the lock itself. Someone had known exactly where to look. This wasn't random. Someone had come to that house believing there was money hidden beneath the floor.
Someone knew there was some money hidden beneath that floor.
Yeah, and they had been right.
Yeah. Someone knew exactly where to look, too.
The question was, who knew about the secret safe? That answer would eventually point investigators towards someone connected to the Phillips family. And as detectives followed that trail, they would uncover abandoned cash, missing boots, contradictory stories, and one incredibly unfortunate decision involving a muddy pickup truck and a garden hose. Sometimes criminals outsmart themselves. In this case, every attempt to erase the evidence only created another clue.
So he's an idiot. Whoever did this is an idiot.
Pretty much.
I don't mean to laugh, but I can't help but laugh at the stupidity of criminals. Like, I think it's funny, and I'm glad they're that stupid.
Me too. If you've listened to enough true crime, you know investigators love one thing almost as much as coffee: patterns. And in this case, the evidence wasn't screaming, it was whispering. One clue here, another clue there. None of them seemed overwhelming by themselves, but together, they began painting a picture that became harder and harder to ignore. The crime scene was carefully processed by members of the Dunklin County Major Case Squad. Every room was photographed, every bloodstain documented, every footprint measured. The hallway where Cecil Phillips had been found became one of the most important locations in the entire investigation. There, pressed into the blood on the carpet, were several shoe impressions. The killer had stepped in blood and unknowingly left behind a signature, Unlike fingerprints, shoe prints rarely identify one specific person, but they can eliminate hundreds or thousands of others. Investigators carefully cut sections of the bloodstained carpet from the floor and preserved them for examination. Meanwhile, detectives continued searching the rest of the home. One detail immediately stood out. Despite the violence of the attack, there wasn't widespread ransacking throughout the house. The killer hadn't emptied drawers in every room. He hadn't turned the entire residence upside down. Instead, the damage seemed concentrated in one specific bedroom. More importantly, one specific closet. That wasn't the behavior of someone randomly looking for valuables. It looked like someone searching for something they had already believed existed. And that something was money. Lots of it. As investigators examined the hidden floor safe, they found the padlock had been cut cleanly. The broken lock lay nearby. A matching piece rested at the bottom of the safe itself. Something had opened it in a hurry. The safe wasn't completely empty, but whoever had been inside before was gone. Strange enough, another safe remained untouched. A smaller, fireproof safe sat in the bedroom. When investigators opened it using keys recovered from Cecil Phillips, they found envelope after envelope of cash. More than $57,000 remained inside. Think about that for a second. Whoever committed these murders had found one hidden catch of money, but somehow missed another one sitting only a few feet away.
How much do you say?
$57,000.
$57,000 in cash.
Yep.
Did your grandparents ever keep cash at the house?
My grandparents are still alive, so I would rather not answer that.
Gotcha. It's a very old-timey thing to do, have a distrust in banks and to keep cash at home. Like, I know my great-grandma, my granny, she passed away years ago, but my mom said she would keep money just in random boxes and random places in the house, just tucked away. And she said it's because whenever she grew up, her parents went through the Great Depression, and so it was just something they instilled in her, is just to keep cash in your home, not in banks. So it's very interesting.
But this suggested something important. The killer didn't know everything about the house. He knew enough to locate the hidden floor safe, but not enough to realize that there was even more money waiting nearby. Sometimes greed has tunnel vision.
Yeah.
Detectives began asking themselves an obvious question. Who knew about the hidden safe? Friends? Neighbors? Family? The answer narrowed the suspect list considerably. The Phillips family explained that very few people even knew the floor safe existed. It wasn't something visitors stumbled upon. You couldn't see it. It sat beneath carpeting inside a closet. Unless someone showed you, you'd never know it was there. Family members told investigators that one person who had likely learned about the safe through family connections was Kevin Matney. Kevin had once been married to the Phillips' granddaughter. During that marriage, conversations about the safe had occurred inside the home. According to testimony, Kevin knew there was money hidden there. That fact naturally raised another question. If Kevin knew, who else might have learned about it? Investigators soon turned their attention to Kevin's father, Ivel Ray Matney Jr. At first glance, there wasn't anything extraordinary about Matney. He lived in a trailer near Dexter, Missouri. He was in his mid-50s, and according to his own account, the night of the murders, he had been very unlucky. He claimed he and his wife argued. He left the house, changed his mind, turned around, then slid his pickup truck into a ditch because of icy roads. Honestly, that part sounded believable. Missouri winters have humbled plenty of drivers. The problem wasn't that his truck landed in the ditch. The problem was everything that happened afterward.
You ever land your truck in a ditch, Hunter?
Several times on purpose, too, drifting on icy roads.
Yeah, I remember whenever I used to work at Sonic in high school, in the wintertime, after we'd get off at midnight, we'd go right across the street to the Town and Country parking lot where it'd be iced over, and we would just be going, just being idiots, and we probably could have got hurt. We got really close to actually hitting the building one time, and then we got stuck, and then a police officer pulled up, and he's like, "What are you guys doing?" And we couldn't get my buddy's truck out because we had went over this, like, where they were trying to push it off the parking lot, and his truck got stuck up on it. And this police officer's like, "So what are you guys up to?" It's like 1:30 in the morning. It was so embarrassing, but it's just what you do. It's a SEMA winter. We have really bad summers and really bad winters.
So late that snowy night, a woman named Pamela Slusher was driving home from work. Road conditions were deteriorating. Visibility wasn't great. Then she noticed a man climbing out of a ditch and waving for help. That man was Ivel Ray Matney. He desperately wanted a ride home. He even handed Pamela his wallet so she could see who he was. That's a bold strategy because it's like he's saying, "Here's my driver's license, please. Don't think I'm weird." Eventually, after checking that he wasn't carrying anything suspicious, Pamela agreed to drive him. She noticed he carried a blue duffel bag. Inside, she could see clothing. Nothing seemed particularly unusual until they reached his trailer. Matney suddenly produced what she later described as an enormous amount of cash. Not a wallet, not a money clip, a thick roll of $100 bills. About the size of a soda can. He peeled off two $100 bills and tossed them into the seat. Pamela refused. She insisted she hadn't helped him for money. He threw the cash back anyway before walking inside. Now, imagine giving a stranded stranger a ride home, and they casually try to pay you $200. You'd probably spend the next week wondering exactly what kind of evening that person had experienced. Detectives certainly did.
I don't think I would. Sorry, but if I'm giving someone a ride home and they just pull out a stack of money and they say, "Hey, here's $200," I'm gonna say, "Ain't my business, thank you."
Yeah, but for $200, why didn't they call a tow truck unless they were up to no good?
Hey,
Or
like
a
I say,
friend. Well, I guess back then you didn't have cell phones, so it's a little different.
yeah, I mean it's the '90s, but still, I'd
But
be like,
$200 in the 90s was like a whole week's worth of pay.
I know, and that's why I'd be like, you know what? None of my business. I probably would not be. I probably would have thought about it later on, but I definitely would have took the money.
So only a short time later, a tow truck driver arrived to pull Matney's pickup from the ditch. Even that encounter became unusual. After the truck was winch free, Matney somehow managed to get stuck again.
We've all been there, right?
Yeah. The driver had to pull him out a second time. Finally, they returned to Matney's home. When it came time to pay, Matney reached into that same large roll of cash and handed over another $100 bill. So he paid the tow truck driver less than what he paid this random lady.
What a douchebag.
That's why it's so strange.
This guy's all over the map.
For investigators, this raised an uncomfortable question. Where had all that cash suddenly came from? Especially on the very night two elderly people had been robbed and murdered. Days later, investigators revisited the exact location where Matney's truck had slid off the road. They weren't expecting much. Snow, mud, tire tracks, maybe a few discarded items. Instead, they found something astonishing. Lying in the field about a dozen feet from the tire ruts was a neatly wrapped bundle of cash. $3,000, Jacob, still bundled together.
$3,000.
The paper wrapper bare handwritten numbers. When family members examined the writing, they recognized it. According to testimony, it matched Cecil Phillips' handwriting. Investigators believe the bundle had likely fallen from whoever carried it away from the Phillips home. Sometimes criminals don't realize they're dropping evidence, and sometimes evidence waits patiently in a snowy field until someone comes looking. That discovery changed everything. Now investigators weren't simply working with theories. They had money apparently connected to the victims, found exactly where Matney's truck had gone off the road. The pieces were beginning to fit together. But detectives were about to discover something at Matney's trailer that would make the picture even clearer. By now, investigators had a growing list of coincidences. A man connected to the victims through family, a mysterious roll of cash, a truck that happened to end up in a ditch on the same night as the brutal double homicide. $3,000 wrapped in a paper that appeared to have been labeled in Cecil Phillips' handwriting. One coincidence? Sure. Two? Maybe. But detectives know that eventually coincidences stop being coincidences. They start becoming evidence.
Right.
Only a few days after the murders, investigators returned to Ivel Ray Matney's trailer. What they saw immediately caught their attention. Matney was outside, washing the inside of his pickup truck. Not the outside, not the muddy fenders, not the salt-covered doors, the inside, in the middle of winter. Water was dripping from the cab. The floorboards were soaked. Meanwhile, the exterior of the truck remained caked in mud. That struck investigators as odd.
Yeah.
Think about it. If your truck has just spent time sliding through muddy fields in the middle of the Missouri winter, what's the first thing most people wash? The outside.
Yep.
Absolutely the outside. What idiot would start on the
Hunter,
inside?
In the middle of the winter, I want you to go outside and start washing the interior of your truck. Make sure you get it so soapy and wet in the floorboard that it's dripping. And just leave your door open while it's freezing cold outside.
So yeah, you would wash the outside first. Not the carpet, not the floor mats, not every inch of the interior. To detectives, it looked less like cleaning and more like removing something. Blood, mud, fibers. No one could say for certain, but the timing was very suspicious. A search warrant was soon executed at Matney's home. Investigators carefully photographed every room before beginning a methodical search. Sometimes these searches produce very little. Old receipts, bills, a junk drawer that somehow contained 17 screwdrivers and absolutely none of the ones you actually need. This search would be different. Outside the trailer beneath the attached carport sat a garbage can. Nothing unusual there until officers opened it. Near the bottom, inside a tied plastic trash bag, they discovered paperwork bearing the names of Cecil and Ethel Phillips. Medical receipts, financial documents, check stubs. Some had been torn into pieces. Others still contained handwritten notes. Investigators immediately recognized the names. The documents had belonged to the murdered couple. Now come the obvious question. Why would paperwork from Phillips' home end up buried inside Matney's trash? The defense would later challenge the significance of many pieces of the evidence. But finding personal documents from the victims inside the suspect's garbage was difficult to explain away, especially when those documents hadn't simply blown there with the wind. They'd been intentionally discarded. The search continued. Officers recovered more than $2,000 in cash. By itself, possessing cash isn't illegal. Lots of people keep money at home, especially in rural communities where cash transactions are common. But context matters. This wasn't happening in isolation. It was another piece joining an incredibly complicated puzzle. Investigators found something else. Underneath a bed sat an empty boot box. No boots, just a box. Inside were the original tags from the footwear. The boots were identified as Brahma Canyon Split, which were size 8. Now remember those bloody shoe impressions investigators had collected from the Phillips home? Crime lab examiners compared the tread pattern found in the blood with boots of the exact same make and model. The tread design matched. The width matched. Now to be clear, this didn't prove those exact boots created the impressions. It wasn't as precise as DNA, but it demonstrated that the bloody footprints were consistent with that style of boot, and Matney had owned that exact type. The more investigators looked, the harder it became to ignore. Then came another important discovery. One of the tiny paper bags still inside the empty boot box contained a fingerprint. Crime laboratory analysis compared it with known fingerprints from Matney. Their conclusion? The print belonged to him. Again, not a smoking gun by itself. Of course, someone's fingerprints would be on a boot box from boots they purchased. But there was another question. Where were the boots? Investigators never recovered them. The box remained. The tags remained. The boots had disappeared. So, why would you keep a boot box that you didn't even have the boots for anymore?
Right.
Unless you were storing like old
Something
baseball cards or some crap like that in it.
Right.
And according to prosecutors, they disappeared for a reason. Meanwhile, detectives were comparing Matney's various statements about the activities that night. Like many criminal investigations, it wasn't just what someone said. It was what they changed. Matney gave investigators an account of arguing with his wife before leaving home. He described driving toward another town before changing his mind. He explained ending up in a ditch. On the surface, none of that sounded impossible, but detectives noticed inconsistencies. Timelines shifted, details changed, and every new explanation seemed to create another question. Experienced investigators often say that truthful stories usually become more detailed over time. False stories become more complicated. Then detectives returned to one simple observation: money. Remember Pamela Slusher, the woman who picked Matney up beside the highway? She described him pulling out an enormous roll of cash almost immediately after arriving home. Not days later, not after visiting a bank, that same night. She recalled him casually peeling off two $100 bills as though spending hundreds was no more significant than handing someone $5 for coffee. When investigators compared that story with the bundle of Phillips' money recovered near the ditch, it became far more significant. The timeline fit, the location fit, the evidence fit. As forensic scientists completed their examinations, prosecutors began assembling a case. One built almost entirely on circumstantial evidence. And that's what we're talking about for a moment. Hollywood has convinced people that circumstantial evidence is somehow weak. That's simply not true. In fact, many homicide convictions rely primarily on circumstantial evidence. Imagine walking outside after hearing nothing all night. The ground is dry when you go to bed. You wake up, everything is soaked. You didn't actually see it rain, but you can reasonably conclude it probably did. Now imagine dozens of facts all pointing toward the same conclusion. Money connected to the victims' paperwork in the suspect's trash, matching footwear, a suspicious attempt to clean the inside of a truck, changing explanations, knowledge that money was hidden inside the victim's home. Each clue alone might not answer the mystery. Together, they begin telling a story. And prosecutors believe they knew exactly how that story ended. The case was headed to court. But one major question still remained. Would all these pieces, none of them definitive on their own, be enough to convince a judge beyond a reasonable doubt that Ivor Ray Matney Jr. had committed one of Southeast Missouri's most disturbing double murders? The answer would come in a courtroom, where every single clue would be examined. By the time the case reached court, investigators weren't claiming they had captured the killer on surveillance cameras. There was no confession, no eyewitnesses who could point across a courtroom and say, "That's the man I saw inside the Phillips house." Instead, prosecution presented something far more complicated, a story built from dozens of individual pieces. On their own, each piece might seem ordinary. Together, they painted a picture the judge ultimately found impossible to ignore. One by one, witnesses took the stand. Police officers described entering the Phillips home. Crime scene investigators explained the hidden floor safe. Forensic specialists discussed the bloody footprints. The tow truck driver remembered receiving a crisp $100 bill after pulling Matney's pickup from the ditch. Pamela Slusher recalled giving a stranded man a ride home and watching him casually pull out what she described as an enormous roll of cash. Family members identified the handwriting on the bundle of money found in the snowy field. Others testified about the secret safe, who knew about it, and who had reason to believe money was hidden inside. Each witness added another brushstroke. Eventually, the picture became difficult to ignore. The defense argued something important. Nearly every piece of evidence was circumstantial. No murder weapon had been recovered. No witness had actually seen the killings occur. The boots investigators believed matched the bloody footprints had never been found. The defense maintained those gaps created reasonable doubt. It's a perfect, legitimate argument. Our justice system requires proof beyond a reasonable doubt, not beyond every imaginable doubt. The burden rested entirely on the prosecution. Because Matney waived a jury trial, the decision belonged to a judge rather than 12 jurors. That meant the judge alone would evaluate every witness, every exhibit, every scientific opinion, and every inconsistency. After hearing all the evidence, the judge found Ivor Ray Matney Jr. guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of armed criminal action, and 1 count of first-degree robbery. The court concluded that although no single piece of evidence solved the case, the combined evidence proved guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Matney appealed his convictions. His attorneys argued that the evidence simply wasn't sufficient. Essentially, their position was this: you've shown a lot of suspicious circumstances, but suspicion isn't enough. That's another cornerstone of the justice system. Appeals exist to ensure convictions are legally supported, not merely emotional satisfying. The Missouri Court of Appeals carefully reviewed the record, not to decide whether they personally believe Matney was guilty, but to determine whether a reasonable fact finder could have reached their conclusion based on evidence presented at trial. That's an important distinction. Appeal courts don't retry cases. They review whether the law was correctly applied. The appellate judges examine the evidence piece by piece. The hidden safe, the money found near the wrecked pickup, the victim's documents discovered in Matney's trash, the testimony showing Matney knew or had reason to know the money was hidden inside the Phillips home, the suspicious cleaning of the truck's interior, the matching blood tread, the missing boots, the conflicting explanations about his movement that night. Taken together, the court concluded there was sufficient evidence for the trial judge to find Matney guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. His convictions were affirmed. The verdict would stand, and Matney would spend the rest of his life in prison without the possibility of parole. Cases like this often spark debate. Some people hear circumstantial evidence and immediately assume it's weak, but detectives will tell you something different. Imagine standing in the woods. You don't actually see a deer, but you notice fresh tracks. Broken branches, a patch of disturbed leaves, maybe a tuft of fur caught on a fence. None of these clues proves anything alone, but together, they tell a convincing story. That's exactly what happened here. Investigators didn't rely on dramatic breakthrough. They relied on patience, careful forensic work, and detailed interviews, and dozens of seemingly ordinary facts that slowly connected. Perhaps one of the most chilling parts of this entire case isn't the hidden safe, or the money, or even bloody footprints. It's how ordinary everything looked at first. An elderly couple spending their quiet December evening on a phone call with a granddaughter. Christmas just days away. A television playing. A gate left open. Small details. The kind of things people rarely notice until afterward. Every major investigation has a moment when detectives stop asking, who could have done this, and begin asking, can we prove it? For investigators in Malden, that proof wasn't found in one spectacular clue. It was scattered across a snowy roadside, hidden inside a trash bag, and buried beneath layers of lies. The murders of Cecil and Ethel Phillips remain one of the most significant homicide investigations in the history of Malden. It's a reminder that justice doesn't always arrive through dramatic confessions or impossible forensic breakthroughs. Sometimes, justice is built one clue at a time.
That is a wild story. And I don't know, stories like this is the second tip line episode we've done, and this is the second case out of 4 cases that have talked about something bad happened to someone that's elderly. And it breaks my heart because like those are supposed to be the golden years, right? The years you just can chill out. Like you said, they were just talking to their granddaughter and it was almost Christmas time and they were just trying to live their life and they had saved some money for their family, and those are supposed to be the times you're actually able to just relax. And the fact that it became anything other than that is just heartbreaking.
Yeah, I mean, these elderly people probably saved their money and lived frugal their entire life so that they could leave something behind for their family. And this piece of crap scumbag comes along, takes their lives, and just runs off with their money. Like, that is just so heartbreaking to me that something like this happened so close to home.
Yeah, and it makes you definitely cautious on who you tell your business to. I'm sure they just have told their family about it and they never thought it would be anything. And then through the grapevine, some family member told the next person, and then all of a sudden their granddaughter's father-in-law ends up taking their life. And so if there's one thing you guys can learn from this episode is there's just some things you should keep to yourself. You know, don't trust everybody, even if they are family. There are some things you should just keep.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I'd never heard of this before, and it was a very interesting case. Like, obviously, I don't like the crime that happened, but the story of the crime itself was an interesting one for sure.
It definitely was. I'd never heard of it, and that's why we like doing these episodes, is because you guys know these things. A lot of our listeners are older than us, and so they can be really informative and to let us know things that happened before our time. And I say before our time. Hunter was like a year old whenever this happened, but still, it's like we don't know about it until you guys tell us, and so it's really interesting. But man, my heart breaks for that family.
Yeah, rest in peace, Cecil and Ethel Phillips. And, our hearts do break for the family, and our condolences go out to them because I'm sure they were great people.
And I thank the Lord for every stupid decision that this man made along the way. I'm thankful that he was as big as an idiot as he was to to do the things that got him caught. You know, I'm glad he wasn't a smart criminal that would have left this without answers.
If he didn't have such a big ego with finally having a bunch of money, he probably wouldn't have been caught, because it was the suspicion of like, how's this guy have this money and he's just so nonchalant with it.
Yeah, that's what separates some criminals. Is some criminals can commit a crime and they can just act as everything's normal. This guy couldn't. He committed a crime, and next thing you know, he's in a ditch and he's waving money at people to get himself out of predicaments. And I'm sure if I'm seeing a guy with his truck in a ditch and he has a stack of money, I'm sure if he's living in a trailer, his truck wasn't much to look at anyway. And here he is with a stack of cash. There'd be red flags.
I mean, money can be deceiving. Don't get me wrong. Like, people that looks like they don't have much could be millionaires, and people that looks like they have it all
Yeah.
could have no money. I know this one guy that comes into work. He's an old guy, and he doesn't look like he has a lot, but this guy is worth a lot. Like, and I know he is because we deal with him on a business basis
Right.
regularly, but he doesn't put out that image like he has a lot of money, is what I'm saying.
And I don't know, this guy just made the dumb decisions, and I'm glad he made them. And it got him caught. I'm curious as to what he did with the boots. It's like he was good at getting rid of that evidence, but whenever it came to getting rid of evidence of like having things with their names on them or their handwriting on them, he just kept it around. Like, that's just so stupid. But I'm glad he was stupid enough. I am curious as to where those boots went.
I'm sure he burned them or did something, threw them out in a ditch or something, but why wouldn't he have burned all the other evidence? But, you know, thank God he was stupid and justice was able to do its thing.
So you had said at one point that they found $3,000 just tossed in the snow.
Yes.
I was Googling that while you were talking, and that's roughly about $6,500 today. So, I mean, this guy was just really, I wonder how much he actually ended up taking, because you said that he had left a lot back at the home. And so, I don't know, it's just nuts. And I'm glad he got caught. There's a lot of questions, and that's a crappy thing about circumstantial stuff is it doesn't really paint the most clear picture, but it paints a picture clear enough to get a conviction, which is all you can ask for sometimes.
Well, yeah, I mean, circumstantial evidence can definitely convict you if there's enough of it. But like the last case that we just talked about, I don't believe that there would be enough to convict him. Otherwise, he got charged 5 years ago and he still hadn't been convicted.
Yeah, so I'm glad these two different cases showed us like the both sides of circumstantial versus DNA evidence. It's really cool how that happened, but that's a pretty neat episode. And if you guys enjoy episodes like this and you like for us to tell the stories that you always have the opportunity to go to the link in our bio on all of our social media and find the Google form to submit these cases. And this is how we find them out from you guys. And I think going forward, a lot of the local cases are going to be coming from you guys, which is awesome. It allows us to kind of find other cases that are maybe near the Ozarks or other places in Missouri, or even other places that are outside Missouri. So if you guys are interested, go ahead and do that. And while you're there, go ahead and follow us or like our page, subscribe to us on YouTube, or follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon, anywhere you get your podcast. Follow us. And while you're also at those places, try and engage with us. Leave comments, reviews. 5 stars would be awesome if you could. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I do know that it helps push us into the algorithm a little bit if you guys are sharing our stuff. And as an independent podcast that is self-funded through guys that just work, it's awesome that it costs $0 for you guys to help us out. And so if you guys do that for us, then we're going to continue to give you episodes every Tuesday at 5 a.m., no matter if it's rain, sleet, or snow. So if you want to go ahead and go follow our social medias as well, we're on Facebook at Crime Daddies, and then Instagram at Crime Daddies Pod. If you guys ever want to see pictures of these crimes or people that were a part of these cases, then you will find those there. If you want to go follow our personal social medias, you can find me on Facebook at Jacob Smith, Instagram and TikTok at Jacob W.C. Smith, and then for Hunter,
you can find me on Facebook at Hunter Ben Frampton. You can find me on Instagram at hunter.semo. And you can find me on TikTok at semo_Hunter.
And again, if you guys want to go on our social medias, you can go and find a link to our merchandise. We have some couple t-shirts out, but other than that, I think that's all we got for you this week.
All right, everybody. Remember, listen to the crime, don't be the crime.
Heard that.